Hi, I'm Jodi Daley, and welcome to another edition of PLMA Live. With me is PLMA President Brian Sharoff, and we are here with a very special report about store brands and the retail marketplace and how it is irrevocably changing.
You know, Jodi, change is a very strange phenomenon. It happens all of the time, and often we don't even realize how much certain things are changing. Years may go by before we really notice. 60 years ago, the neighborhood mom-and-pop grocery was replaced by the supermarket chain, and now the supercenter is challenging the supermarket. Thousands of small drugstores have been replaced by huge national drug chains. People buy music and books and shoes online instead of at local stores, and their purchases are shipped on jumbo cargo jets for delivery the next day.
And you know, the horizon is filled with changes yet to come. Look at smartphones, they're everywhere. And no one can really say what that will mean ultimately to retailers and shopping. Look at Facebook, Twitter, other social media. They're revolutionizing how the marketplace and consumers communicate with each other. But change goes far beyond what we already know. And there are concepts out there which at first glance really look like, I don't know, science fiction. Recently, PLMA devoted its 2012 annual meeting and leadership conference just to this subject. Retail futurist Doug Stevens used his crystal ball to look at the changes occurring in the industry. And Tim Simmons caught up with him outside the conference session.
Doug, the title of your presentation at the leadership conference was Retailing, the Next Frontier. What's the next frontier for bricks and mortar retailers?
Well, I think the big story for brick and mortar retail is that in a world where the store can be anywhere, literally even in the consumer's pocket on their mobile device, you need to raise your game. You know, we're seeing things that even 5 years ago were unimaginable. Stores in South Korean subways that you scan with your mobile device and you can order your groceries. We're seeing virtual stores in New York City. So, you know, for brick and mortar, it means that when I make the effort as a consumer to go to a brick and mortar store, I want more than just product. You know, the days of stocking 4 walls with product and expecting consumers to come are over.
Talking about the shopping experience, you write about something called a serendipitous shopper. What's that?
Well, I think technology is starting to bridge the gaps for us as consumers. So, you know, for 2,000 years, retail has always been about the consumer having to go somewhere to get something. Even if that was just a web URL, we had to go somewhere to get products. And I think increasingly what we're going to see through the use of mobile devices, through the connection to our social networks, through our activity online as consumers, we're going to see all that information start to converge. So products increasingly are going to start to come to us instead of us having to go to them.
The internet is certainly changing a lot of things about retailing, but you suggest that the internet itself is changing.
Yeah, there's a couple of really big transitions happening on the internet now, and if you look at the way the internet was formed, when it was initially formed around 1994, a couple of things prevailed. First of all, it was basically text-based, right? Most of what was on the internet was just archived textual information. The second thing was most of that information was being populated by brands and retailers and institutions and governments. So the two big changes are, first of all, most of the information now, the majority of information on the internet, is user-generated. So if I'm a consumer and I'm looking for a review on a particular product while I'm in the store, I don't have to depend on what the brand is telling me anymore or what the retailer is telling me about that product. I can find reviews from people just like me who've actually bought it and tried it and, you know, whether they liked it or not. The second big change is that we're moving away from that text-based internet. So as consumers right now, we're ingesting about 34 gigabytes of information a day. That's 100,000 words a day of text that we're, you know, running through our minds. And we're hitting the point of overload. So what we're going to see, and we're already seeing it, is the advent of more and more video and graphics replacing a lot of that text.
Well, what about the retailer's business model in the future? Is that going to change?
Yeah, it's going to change, and I think we're already starting to see it change. You know, in a pre-internet, pre-mobile world, the idea of a 200,000 square foot Walmart made sense. You know, as consumers, it was great. It was one-stop shop convenience. We'd never seen that much product under one roof, so it was a logical sort of format. But now when we see more and more sales migrating to online, when we're seeing a greater percentage of online sales moving to mobile, that large store format just doesn't make sense anymore.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Tim.
So how is change affecting consumers and what can retailers do about it? Robyn Waters is former vice president of trend, design, and product development at Target, and now runs her own consulting firm. Robyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jodi.
So, how have consumers changed?
Consumers have changed in so many ways. A lot of the changes stem from the result of the economic condition with what we've gone through in terms of the new abnormal. Consumers have also changed in terms of their buying behavior. They exhibit many what I call schizophrenic ways, meaning that they'll scrimp on something and save on something in order to splurge on something else. And those value judgments don't always look the same as they might have, many years ago. So those are just two of the key ways that I feel consumers have changed.
Well, what are the changes that you think are influencing consumers?
Some of the changes influencing consumers are certainly the economic times and the economic conditions, the marketplace, of course, but also people's value equations, what they think is important. What consumers want more than anything is peace of mind. They don't really need another car or t-shirt or a pair of shoes. It's what's important to them that really matters.
Now, in your remarks, you said that retailers have to ask the right questions if they want to understand the customers.
In the past, retailers asked these kinds of questions. Who is my consumer? What is their age? What are their demographics? How many years of college do they have? What is their income level? What is their zip code? And they lumped people into categories based on demographics. Today, the kinds of questions that retailers need to ask are more psychographic. They need to tap into the hearts and minds of the consumer. They need to ask what's important to the consumer today. Value judgments have changed. The markets have shifted. The whole global nature of the marketplace has changed the game. So retailers need to be more concerned with what's important to the customer, what's going on in their hearts and minds, not just what's going on out there in the global marketplace.
Well, you say things are the same but different. In what way?
Things are the same in that we still have to deal with the things that we deal with on an everyday basis, but the world around us has changed dramatically. I'll give you one example. The iPhone or smartphones. They are a communication device, but they're more than that. They're a computer, they're a way to access the global marketplace, and soon they're going to be your wallet. Near field communications are now allowing something called Google Tap and Pay, where you literally carry your finances on your iPhone. And that's just one small way, but it's going to affect how we look at everything.
You talk about how everything old is new, the idea of mass customization, luxurious commodities. What are some of the trends that you feel are driving consumers?
Those are three of the key trends that I talk about in my book, The Hummer and the Mini, and here's why they're important. Everything old is new again. Nostalgia is important, but not just nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It taps into what has meaning, what gives depth to consumers' lives. So any brand or any manufacturer that can take an old product, an old brand, and reinvent it for today's value is going to have a great advantage. A luxurious commodity. I think manufacturers' greatest fear these days is that their product will become a commodity, because when a product becomes a commodity, it's all based on price, and that's a downward spiral.
Robyn, thank you so much for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jodi.
Now, market researchers are trying to find new and better ways to determine what shoppers are thinking. Several companies, in fact, are hard at work trying to read brainwaves. Now, it may seem a little exotic, but it's not as far-fetched as it sounds.
Jodi, finding out what people really want has been a dream of retailers for ages. But Nielsen NeuroFocus wants to make the dream a reality. Dr. Stephen Miller is global director of their program. Dr. Miller, what is neuromarketing?
Neuromarketing is a new field of science now being applied in business, which is where we record the neural activity of consumers to provide us on insights into communication strategies, brand, packaging, product use.
Do you really attach sensors to people's brainwaves?
We attach sensors to the top of their hair, and that amplifies the electrical signals coming off the body very harmlessly. They're there all the time. And so we're basically listening with microphones to your brainwaves, and then we use some pretty complex math to separate out the different frequency bands, the kind of the way your cell phone works. And so we can listen in on the different communication networks in the brain. There's separate networks for attention, there's a separate network for emotion, and one for memory, and they operate at different frequencies. And so we can see 1,000 times a second when somebody's looking at an ad or listening to a narrative or looking at a package, what they're looking at, with eye tracking, and then how much attention they're allocating to it, emotion and memory. And from that we can derive things like purchase intent, novelty and awareness scores around a given campaign.
How do you use the information you get?
Well, we set up really rigorous experimental design. So we set up experiments where we're going to make direct comparisons with well-identified consumer groups, and we're going to run the campaigns in front of the consumers while we record their brain activity, look at where they're seeing, and then we're going to do our analysis and provide that information back to the client to help identify business needs or answers to business needs and business actions. So again, things like what elements of a new package design are working, which ones are less neurologically effective, are there elements to it which are overwhelming, what are the evocative elements of product use, because those elements, when captured in an image, can be used at point of sale and drive up sales in an aisle or for a particular product.
Is there a difference between the way men and women make buying decisions?
It's really important for people to understand that men and women really differ in the way that they make decisions. Men are much more impulsive buyers, and there's a lot of things that are much easier for men to process, where women can handle more complex information. They have they're more about comparative shopping. They're more about the social element or context for shopping that drives their decision making. And so if you're thinking about trying to attract a particular group by age or by gender, it's really important to get to make sure that people understand that the brains are really wired differently. They're really anatomically and also functionally different.
What are the implications for retailers and store brands?
Well, I think the implications are that they can gain a lot more insights into the details of how a product is perceived and how people's immediate emotional feelings influence their deliberation and decision making about purchasing an aisle. So we can help them make products kind of pop out, stand out. We can help design aisles, planograms, packaging, so that consumers that want to purchase something can find it easier. And once it's in the home, the consumption also happens earlier. It's really about helping them get more insights into the decision-making, thoughts, feelings, and actions than what they've previously had. It's not about reading minds. It's not about tricking people. It's really about helping make it easier for people to find the stuff that they're looking for.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Reading brainwaves may seem scary, but it is one more example of changes that may lie ahead. Back to you, Jodi.
Well, change can be a real challenge, and making it work for your own company is not always easy. PLMA offered a 3-hour workshop at the annual Meeting and Leadership Conference to instruct manufacturers and retailers on techniques of change management. His message was a combination of motivation and education. Not everyone welcomes change inside their companies. There are those who will resist it openly, while others will find excuses and explanations why changes are not needed, while the good old way of doing things is still the best way. For some, doing things in a new way evokes a sense of loss, a sense of uncertainty, a need for self-preservation. On the other hand, Schoemer made it clear that managing change in a company cannot be ignored or delayed. He urges companies to create a change-adaptive culture in which management, sales, and marketing all integrate change into their normal way of doing business. Now, Brian, how has the subject of change gone over with manufacturers and retailers?
Well, one thing's for sure, it's having its impact. J.C. just hired the former head of Apple's very successful retail store business to revamp their business. Apple, in turn, hired a veteran of bricks and mortar retailing to expand their operations. Walmart has concluded a potential game-changing deal with Facebook. And Amazon and Google are attempting and teasing everyone with the concept of their own stores. So the retail landscape of 2020 will be extraordinarily different than what it is today. So I asked Terry Lee, who has worked with Safeway, Albertson, and Dollar General, what he makes of the changes coming in the years ahead. Terry, do retailers embrace change?
I think retailers embrace change like most other people, in that change is something that most people resist. I do think that because of the changes in the economy over the last few years, the rapid change in the economy and how the consumer has changed over that time so significantly, that retailers are probably more acute to having to change and change faster going in the future.
Are retailers in a position to take advantage of changes in consumer behavior?
The challenge for retailers in changing consumer behavior is that retailers are, most of their businesses are built around brick and mortar. And that's a difficult thing to change quickly. But as the consumer changes rapidly, they're going to have to force themselves to look at alternatives. And that's a difficult thing when you have hundreds of thousands of stores that you've invested in over the years, and that becomes really the basis of your business.
Which retailers are going to benefit?
Those retailers who really can embrace and move quickly. The pace of change and the amount of change continues to grow exponentially. And so retailers need to embrace change and move quickly. And as a result of that, those who are capable of doing that will grow stronger. Those who are not are going to quickly go on the wayside.
That was fascinating. Thank you so much, Brian. So, will store brands benefit from the changes ahead, or will store brands be overwhelmed by the changes themselves?
And we will keep you posted.
Yes, we will. And for Brian and myself, thank you so much for watching this special report.